before you even fire a weapon, before you customize your character for way too long. And yes, we've all spent an unreasonable amount of time adjusting things that will immediately be covered by a jacket. Cyberpunk 2077 tells you exactly what kind of world you've stepped into through sound alone. In its low mechanical hum of the city, the distorted synths bleeding through alleyways, the sudden silence that hits when the neon fades and you're left alone with the noise of the city breathing around you. This is a game where music isn't just background noise, it's the pulse of Night City itself. And speaking personally, the soundtrack clearly did something, right? Because at one point, I'm 30 hours into this game in a single week, which is not healthy behavior, but it's excellent research for this video. So with that being said, today we're breaking down why the music of Cyberpunk 2077 works so incredibly well, and how it transforms Night City from a setting into something that feels alive and unforgettable. Cyberpunk 2077 is an open-world action RPG set in Night City, a massive futuristic metropolis built on excess, ambition, and decay. It blends first-person combat, role-playing systems, and narrative choice inside a world inspired by classic cyberpunk fiction, a genre that has always been more about mood than optimism. You play as V, a mercenary trying to survive in a city where technology and humanity are deeply intertwined, and where every upgrade, every deal, and every shortcut comes with a cost. Cyberpunk 2077 explores themes of identity, power, legacy, and what it means to exist in a world that generally does not care if you're burned out. And at a high level, this is where the music becomes essential. Because before the story ever asks you to think about these themes, the soundtrack makes you feel them. Night City doesn't ease you in, the music tells you immediately, this place is loud, crowded, and never going to slow down for you. Seriously, the city does not believe in rest days. The soundtrack of Cyberpunk 2077 is led by these individuals you see on your screen now. Marcin was already well known for his work on The Witcher 3, where he used folk influences and restraint to build a fantasy world that felt ancient and grounded. PT, on the other hand, comes from a background rooted in electronic and experimental music, which makes him perfect fit for a cyberpunk world where everything sounds slightly broken, but on purpose. Together, their styles collide in a way that mirrors Night City itself. Organic humanity constantly fighting for space inside cold synthetic systems. Their approach leans heavily into analog synths, distortion, and industrial textures, creating music that feels less like a traditional score and more like a city quietly judging you as you walk past. Not aggressively, just passively disappointing. Inside the game, the music works as an extension of Night City's personality. Exploration tracks are subdued and atmospheric, built on pulsing synths and lingering tones that never fully resolve. It creates that sense that the city is always in motion, always active, even when you're standing still doing absolutely nothing productive. Combat music, on the other hand, ramps things up to 10, with aggressive beats and distorted layers that make firefights feel chaotic and overwhelming. Which is fitting, because Night City absolutely does not do fair fights. You're not meant to feel clean or heroic when things kick off. You're meant to feel stressed, overstimulated, and slightly outmatched. A standout track like V captures the core identity of the game perfectly. It blends heavy bass with mechanical rhythms and subtle melodic edge that sneaks up on you. The music never grabs you by the collar and tells you how to feel, but it absolutely nudges you in the right direction, which is usually towards tension, unease, or low-grade existential dread. Outside the game, Cyberpunk's soundtrack has built a strong identity of its own. People listen to it independently, which is always the sign of a great game score. These tracks don't need glowing billboards or flying cars to hit. They stand on their own. The music has inspired countless covers, remixes, and extended mixes online. It's become a favorite for study playlists, night drives, and staring dramatically out of a window pretending you live in Night City, which I have absolutely never done. Definitely not. It's also been praised for how confidently it commits to its aesthetic in a genre where a lot of futuristic soundtracks start blending together. Cyberpunk music is instantly recognizable, and that's not an accident. When you really step back and think about the music of Cyberpunk 2077, it becomes clear that this soundtrack was never meant to comfort you. It's not here to make you feel heroic, validated, or reassured that everything will work out in the end. Instead, it exists to apply pressure, constantly, quietly, and relentlessly. The music isn't asking for your attention, it's imposing itself on you, the same way Night City imposes itself on everybody who lives there. Unlike more traditional game soundtracks that rise and fall with players' emotional arc, Cyberpunk's music feels stubbornly indifferent. You can succeed, fail, or barely survive a mission, and the soundtrack often responds with the same cold persistence. That emotional flatness isn't a flaw, it's a statement. In this world, individual moments don't matter as much as the system they exist within. The city doesn't care how impressive you think you are, and the music reflects that attitude perfectly. One of the most striking choices the composers make is prioritizing texture and rhythm over melody. There are very few tracks that you'd hum to yourself casually, and that's intentional. Instead of giving you clean, memorable themes, the music burrows into your head through repetition. Pulsing bass lines, upscaling synths, and mechanical beats loop over and over until they stop feeling like music and start feeling like environmental noise. It blurs the line between score and sound design, which makes Night City feel less like a stage and more like a living system. That approach directly mirrors the game's obsession with systems, corporations, technology, social hierarchies, all grinding forward regardless of who gets crushed underneath. The music rarely resolves itself because the world itself never resolves. Beats don't conclude cleanly, tension doesn't disappear, even moments of relative calm feels temporary. Like the soundtrack is waiting for the next spike in chaos. It creates a low-level anxiety that stays with you the entire time you're playing, whether you're consciously noticing it or not. A defining sample of this is in the song The Rebel Path. This track doesn't feel like a rallying cry or a triumphant anthem. It feels like inevitability. The distorted synths grind forward with a sense of weight that never lifts, and the rhythms feel less like momentum and more like resistance. Every beat sounds like it costs something. The track doesn't promise that rebellion will lead to freedom, it suggests that rebellion is exhausting, dangerous, and possibly meaningless, but necessary anyway. So with that, give The Rebel's Path a listen. What makes the track especially effective is how emotionally restrained it is. There's no soaring melody telling you that you're doing the right thing, there's no music reward for pushing forward. Instead, the song just keeps moving, almost indifferent to your presence. It reinforces the idea that fighting the system isn't glamorous. It's just something you commit to, knowing fully well it might destroy you in the process. That emotional restraint is a defining trait of the entire soundtrack. Cyberpunk 2077 rarely tells you how to feel. It doesn't label moments as sad, happy, or victorious in obvious ways. Instead, it leaves emotional space open, allowing players to project their own feelings onto the experience. Stress, numbness, determination, anger. Whatever you're feeling in that moment, the music adapts by not getting in the way. It exists alongside your emotions rather than overriding them. Silence is another crucial tool the soundtrack uses masterfully. There are long stretches where the music pulls back entirely, leaving you with ambient city noises, distant echoes, or faint synthetic hum. These moments make Night City feel eerily real, like a place that exists independently of you. And when the music does re enter, it doesn't feel like a cue, it feels like the city deciding to remind you that it's still there, still watching, still moving. This push and pull between sound and silence is what makes the world feel alive. The city doesn't constantly perform for you, it doesn't always escalate when things get intense. Sometimes it stays quiet in moments where you expect drama, which makes everything feel more grounded and unsettling. The lack of musical guidance forces you to sit with the consequences of what's happening instead of being emotionally carried through it. The collaboration between composers also plays a huge role in why the soundtrack feels so layered. Instead of a single music identity, you get multiple perspectives colliding. Industrial aggression, ambient melancholy, experimental electronic textures. Those influences don't always bend cleanly, and that's the point. The music sounds fragmented because the world is fragmented. Progress and decay exit side by side. Humanity and machinery are constantly competing for space, and the soundtrack captures that conflict without ever spelling it out. And maybe the most ironic part of this is how constant the music was during the game's launch period. Systems broke, physical malfunctions, NPCs occasionally abandoning the laws of reality, but the soundtrack never wavered. While other parts of the experience struggled to hold together, the music stayed locked in, reinforcing the atmosphere no matter what chaos was happening on screen. When everything else felt unstable, the soundtrack became the emotional glue holding the experience together. That consistency is why the music continues to hold up outside of gameplay. Listening to the soundtrack later doesn't just trigger memories of missions or locations, it pulls you back into a mental state. That feeling of constant motion, underlying tension, and synthetic beauty layered over something deeply uncomfortable. It's not nostalgia in the traditional sense, it's reflection, almost a warning. In a genre overflowing with futuristic sixth scores, Cyberpunk 2077's music stands apart because it refuses to sanitize its vision of the future. It doesn't make technology sound exciting or aspirational, it makes it sound invasive, overwhelming, and unavoidable. The soundtrack doesn't promise that things will get better, it asks whether progress without humanity is worth the cost at all. But fully committing to that idea, the music elevates Night City beyond a setting and turns it into something that feels almost sentient. A place that doesn't just exist for players, but one that endures, evolves, and consumes. That's why the soundtrack works so well. It doesn't try to impress you, it tries to immerse you, whether you're comfortable with it or not. At its core, the music of Cyberpunk 2077 proves how powerful game soundtracks can be when they fully commit to their world. It doesn't just accompany the experience, it shapes it, colors it, and sometimes make it feel heavier than expected. Long after the screen fades to black, those synths and distorted echoes linger, like the memory of a city you visited but never truly escaped. And with that, if you got a favorite soundtrack from the game, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear it. And if there's any other games you'd like me to cover music-wise, let me know as well in the comments down below. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.